Today I'm going to teach you how the evolution of the alphabets occurred, stemming from Proto-Sinaitic or Proto-Canaanite down to Phoenician, which is also known as Ancient Hebrew. They're not exactly the same language, but they do have this more or less the same characters, to the formation into the Greek characters, which made its way into forming the Latin or Roman characters, which is more or less equivalent to the English letters we have today. Now, we start off with Aleph, which means ox or ox head, which, as you can see, is representative as a picture, which straightened out and became more triangularized over time until eventually it became the ancient Hebrew or Phoenician form, which we see currently here. It then became straightened out and pivoted till it became the Greek letter alpha, which is the A as we know it today. The next letter is Beit, which means bayit or house. This also became configured over time, again became pivoted to its form where it is in the ancient Hebrew language as you see right now. Then it became flipped due to the fact that the Semitic languages were written from right to left and Greek was written from left to right, so many of these letters were switched over time. This then developed a bottom, which became the beta in Greek, and then the letter B in English. The next letter we have is Gimel, which according to some means camel, although there are differs in explanation. It started off, as you can see, it already looks very similar to a gamma, became slightly modified to the ancient Hebrew form, then simply flipped to reach the gamma form in the Greek, and then we have two letters deriving from this. We have C, which simply is curving it with a bottom, and then we have G. We have a slightly variation. That is why it has G, the sound of gamma or gimel. However, it is in the place of the letter C in the alphabet. This C and G became in the forms that we know it today. The next, there is a disagreement about how exactly Daled, the next letter, came about. Some say it means fish, some say it means door. Either way, as you can see, it's simplified into a simple triangle shape, which was often tilted towards the side in ancient Hebrew or Phoenician, and then came right side up in the form of the Greek delta. As you can tell, Dalet and delta sound very similar. Again, this pivoted on its side and became the letter D as we know it today. The next letter we have is Hey, which is simply an expression of like, well, hey, that's what we have nowadays. It's like, what's up? A person exclaiming. As you can see, it is a person basically raising his arms up and shouting. The head was essentially lost over time, became simplified again till a sort of like a pitchfork symbol, which gradually became tilted over time, pivoted once again, straightened out. As this form you see here is of ancient Hebrew. Then again it becomes flipped. Tail is removed, becomes epsilon in Greek, and that derives the letter E as we know it. The next letter is Vav or Wow, which means hook or pin. As you can see, there's this version, and there's also a modified version that does not have the circle. Many of the characters were written initially in various different forms. These in turn developed to the modern Hebrew form, which looks something akin to the figure you see on your right. This figure was then modified into a Y-like shape, which became upsilon in the Greek language, which ultimately developed into the letter Y. Now, this letter also developed into a various form where the two legs at the top, or two arms I should say, were pivoted to the side and it became sort of an F. As you can tell, the initial sound of the letter was a V or a W, usually in the form of a W. However, over time it became closer to a V, or sometimes used as both. A V is close to a F sound, and hence that letter came about. And essentially, the V also came about as well as the letter V, as you can see, is a shortened version of the Y. And Y, V, and W are often interchanged without a variety of languages. We see a lot of roots interchanging between those three letters. Now the V itself was transformed into a U and was initially used in the V form for both the purposes of a U and a V. And then later on was the development of the W, or double V, which created the W sound, which was likely initially the sound that the letter had made. Now we have the letter Zayin, or Zayin, which means a mattock or a hoe, or some other various type of gardening or farming tool. This has the Z sound. You can see it was very simply modified into Zeta, and then we have Z as we know it today. The next letter we have is Chet, which simply represented a wall. As you can see here, was ultimately flipped to its ancient Hebrew or Phoenician equivalent, simplified into an H form, which is Eta, and then H as we have it today. The next letter we have is Tet, or Thet, and this represents a basket of some sort, which is simply a circle with an X in it, which was ultimately pivoted to a more plus-like shape in the ancient Hebrew form, and was simplified further into the theta, which we have in Greek, and that has no equivalent in the English language. Now, the next letter we have is Yod, or Yud, which correlates to the word Yad in Hebrew, meaning hand. Could also be representing a forearm, which was again pivoted over time, developed into somewhat of a Z-like shape, which as you see here is in the form of ancient Hebrew, developed into a more expanded or drawn out form in more of an I-like shape, which became iota in the Greek language, leading to the letter I, and as the Y, which is the sound that it makes, is often correlated with J, as we have Yerushalayim and Jerusalem. So the I became curved at the end and gave birth to the letter J as well. Now, the next letter we have is Kaf, which means palm of a hand. As you can see here, we have the 4 lines there. The form was ultimately had 4 fingers, developed a tail, so to speak, at the end, became simplified into 3 prongs, and then became into a more angled fork-like pattern, as became the kaf that you have in ancient Hebrew, as you see here. This again became pivoted, became shortened into a K-like fashion, which is the kappa in Greek, or K as we know it in the English language. The next we have is Lamed, or Lam, which represents a shepherd's staff. Didn't do the greatest job of drawing it here, but as you can get the idea, you've seen Little Bo Peep and so forth. Again, this got transferred and actually flipped in the Hebrew world, or ancient Hebrew Phoenician world this time, and then got simplified into a simple L-like curve, as we see here. This became straightened and ultimately gave way to the letter L. However, it got flipped beforehand, which gave rise to lambda as we know it. And just to show the letter L we have here is formed like that. The next one we have is mem, or mem, which means water, correlated to the word mayim. And this is symbolized by a series of waves, which ultimately developed a tail and was simplified over time, became shortened, a little more squiggly. This, as you see it, is the form in ancient Hebrew. Then it lost its tail and became straightened and turned, simplified, and to the mu in Greek, and M as we know it in English language. The next letter we have is Nun, which means snake. As you can see, it's a simple curve-like structure. This, in turn, led to a more angle-like form of the letter, which was shifted upwards and modified slightly into the form you see it here, which is an ancient Hebrew form. Again, it was flipped horizontally and simplified, lost its tail, and became nu in Greek, and N as we know it today.